Welcome to the Backyard Professor Chess videos. I'm here in my actual backyard. I'm going to show you a game that I think is one of the most remarkable kingside attacks that I have ever seen. This is simply breathtaking how this works. It's from A. Miles and Ulf Andersson. It was played in Las Palmas in 1980, the Fianchetto opening. A very interesting, unusual opening. This is out of the book Chess, The Art of Logical Thinking by Neil MacDonald, a very excellent book. What makes this book excellent is he explains every single move in 30 different masterful games. No, Sassy. No. My dog's out here and I hope she doesn't bark and bother me too much, but you know, she's enjoying the good weather along with me. G3. This is one of the most astonishing kingside attacks I have ever seen, and it opens with some of the most interesting opening I have ever seen. He doesn't put any of his pawns in the center immediately. He starts by fianchettoing his bishop. Whoop, not C5, 6, C5, C5. His opponent opens with C5, and now he fianchettos his bishop. A very interesting flank opening for sure. He's going to hit the center. Black's going to hit the center here. And now white develops the knight, which is beautifully logical as far as that goes. And this is an irregular opening, but he says Miles isn't neglecting his development at all. He's already, after just 3 moves, he's ready to castle. He's ready to begin a thrust in the center and get his king to safety before black can. So this is an interesting situation. Of course, black is going to fianchetto his bishop now, too. He says, well, if my opponent can, then I can. So now he puts a C3. Have you ever seen such an interesting opening? The idea behind the C3 pawn move is to support the D4 square here with the pawn, which is being contested strongly. So white is not going to let the black pieces take over this square without a contest. Very interesting how he does this. He fianchettos his bishop. Now comes the D4 thrust. So now we're beginning to see he's got the long diagonal of a monster of a bishop potential, just like he does, except white is limiting that black bishop, whereas the white bishop has huge influence at this point. And he goes C takes D4, of course. He's going to contest the center with the pawn. And C takes D4. So we have a central pawn. So therefore, reading the board, white has the more central space at this point, mind you. And now comes D5. And the knight develops up here to C3. And now you can begin to see he's actively contesting the squares. He's working on the center with his knights. So his irregular side opening did not really affect his game in a negative manner, at least so far as we can tell at this point. E6, and now bishop comes up to F4. Now this is an interesting, in contrast to white's queen bishop, is developed outside his pawn structure. It's a small difference, but it makes all the difference in this game. So this is a very important situation. He's got the bad bishop because of his pawn, but he's going to put it up here where it's useful, hitting the strong diagonal here and recognizing that he's got the strong diagonal here. It's being limited at this point, but the white bishop is hemmed in. By reading the board this way, it helps us understand how to best develop our pieces. So this is always critically important to do this. Knight G comes up here to E7. It's by making the small significant differences that the games are won and lost. Queen pops up here to D2, giving his bishop support for the angle. And now black castles. Get his king out of the danger early on, so that when the fireworks begin, you're not stuck in the middle. Bishop claims the H6. Now he's going to contest the main defender of black's king with this thrust. right? Bishop takes the bishop. Queen takes the bishop, and we already see how, because of black's opening, he has weaknesses of the dark squares around his king. And as David Bronstein, the great grandmaster, had noted, when you have weaknesses of one color around your king, the other squares also end up being weak. This is very interesting. So he's going to put the cramp onto the king's side here with this queen h6. A very strong move, he says. Knight comes up here to f5, puts the question to the queen. So the queen pops down here to d2. The whole point of white's play is to get rid of one of the defenders of the black king, because these weaknesses here are not going to go away. They're permanent now. So this is a very interesting point for him to see. He pulls up the b6. The center's been blocked, so he tries to activate his side pieces. He pulls over his rook to d1. He anticipates queen f6 by the queen over here, is what he says the reason why he did that move. Bishop comes up to a6, grabbing a diagonal. It's not a particular glorious square for the bishop, however, but he is developing. And now Miles pushes the h-pawn to h4. At this point, he says, he's getting ready to castle, but he doesn't necessarily have to castle immediately because of any danger, so he forestalls castling in order to get his pawns in a stronger position. And this is very important. Knight comes up to a5, and he's got a question mark. He's wondering, what is black doing here? This is not going to help black at all. White is pushing the pawns, putting the question to that wonderful knight at this point in time. Knight has to drop down here to d6. And now the pawns continue their push. Now, observe how he systematically, Miles, the white pieces, systematically plays against the weaknesses of this black king side. This is masterful exploitation against those weaknesses. Now he's got a sharp attack going on. He's going to obliterate the king side if Anderson isn't careful. Queen does come up to f6 for sure. She is trying to come to the aid of her king, and now the black's king side is beaten up. He takes it with the f-pawn, and he describes why it should be taken with the f-pawn instead of the h-pawn. The h-pawn will give, he's got this open file. If he took it with the h-pawn and gave white the open file with the queen coming in, the king dodging up and the other rook coming in, it can get ugly fast. This is now officially a direct kingside attack because he has beaten up that kingside. And it doesn't look particularly vulnerable right now, but it really is. The way he exploits this is absolutely incredible, how he does this. Queen now comes back up to h6, putting the cramp on the black king. Rook comes up to f7, and now the pawn continues its march up. He doesn't necessarily have to castle in order to have a very safe kingside attack because there's virtually nothing coming at him from the center against his king. So see again, chess rules, there's always an exception to the chess rules. Castle early, we're told, in classical chess theory, but this means that he would actually take away some of his power points. Why take that rook off that fabulous file? See that? That's interesting how this works. So now Anderson has to think quick. Queen comes down here to g7. He's going to directly challenge the attack. The knight comes up here on that fabulous outpost of e5. Now this is sensational material for an attack. And The reason why is the queen will take the queen, and the rook will take the queen. And without the queens on the board, that is one less defender black has, because white is in a superb position to be in a kingside attack. So that only helped white in this instance because of the structure of his weakened kingside and the strength of the open file for white. Rook f goes back to f8. He dodges back down to f8. And knight comes up here to d7. One of the golden rules of chess strategy, if you have a piece on a good square, find an even better square for it. And that's a better square for that knight. He absolutely is riddled with weaknesses here, and white is taking complete advantage of those weaknesses. And once again, he has used his entire army in this. This rook is not yet in the game, and the attack is already completely on. Very interesting how he does this. Rook comes back up to f7. Knight now comes over to f6 check. The coordination, one of the nice things about playing through the master chess games is the coordination of the rooks and the knights in getting to the king is really spectacular to see. It's one of the fun parts of seeing how the masters do their kingside attacks. King has to come up to h8. Bishop comes over to h3. Very interesting, hitting the weaknesses right in the center. It's a very fascinating thing. Bishop comes back over here to c8. He realizes that his pieces on this side of the board are doing nothing. So while black is forced to bring his forces back over here, white can continue on bringing pressure against the black king. Isn't that interesting how that works? Now, interestingly, the king dodges up d2. Why? Because he's going to activate his other rook, of course. Absolutely. That's the idea anyway. The rook comes over here to g7, trying to make way for the bishop to get over to here to help guard the king. But he's far too late at this point, because now white has another resource. The f-pawn is going to get up into this attack. Notice how white is systematically utilizing and comparing, coordinating the pieces and the pawns in this kingside attack. This is beautifully done. Very, very interesting. Rook goes to b8. Rook comes over to h1. The attack is going to be absolutely relentless here. Knight at a goes to c4 check. He's trying to get some counterplay against white on this side of the board. If he can forestall white's attack by counterattacking, then he can gradually bring his pieces over here with the gain of time. This will help him gain tempo, is what black is trying to think here. King comes up to d3. The king is a strong piece. He says use it. This king is in the game. Every one of white's pieces is pretty much superior to all of black's pieces, which have been playing a defensive role at this point in time, right? Very interesting. Rook at b to b7, so now he connects his rooks on the 7th rank. That's about all he can do, because this bishop is virtually useless. It's not in the game. It hasn't been in the game. The rook is barely now getting into the game, and the knight has been misplaced over on the side of that board. It's no wonder, based on the position of the pieces, that white is having such a good kingside attack, right? That makes perfect sense. Chase the knight away. Why not? You don't have to leave that knight there. Chase him back to where he came from, and unfortunately, there's only one or two good squares for the knight that's safe, and look how far out of the action that knight has been forced to be. Black is virtually 1-2 powers down in this game. See, if you can learn how to read the board, even though the pieces are on the board, if they're not being able to be used, then they're not there. I mean, it's the same equivalent, right, of being not there. Now watch. Boom. Again, another pawn thrust. This time, the e-pawn finally gets into the game, and this is a decisive factor because if white can break through this center, he'll get to that king. That's very interesting how he does this. D takes the e4 and puts the king in check. Knight at c takes the d4 pawn. Again, bringing with tempo, gaining time, bringing his other knight into this battle too. I mean, this is incredible. Knight takes the e4. That's all he can do. The king takes the e4, and notice how centralized, notice how the king has come up into this game to give support for this kingside attack. And notice where black's pieces are. One is way out of here, completely useless. The other one has been useless for the entire game, and this one is connected here, but that's not the best square for him at all. Isn't that interesting? Half of black's army virtually plays no part in this. His king has to hide in the corner, and the white king is active and very powerfully centralized. This is great chess to note. Knight comes back over to b5. He's trying to get his knight back into the game, and the king comes to e5. Now that's centralizing a king with a vengeance. That's powerful. He's got every piece in the attack here. This is fantastic how he's taken a grandstand centralized view, he says. Rook b comes over here to e7. He's got to protect that pawn. And now he says black has lost control of the dark squares around his king, but how is white to make this breakthrough? Because it is a, you know, he's hitting granite here. He's hitting granite here. He can't bring his rook over here. The rook's not going to be able to go do too much damage here. How do you break through? He says this. The secret is this. When you have a bind on squares of one color, in this case the white squares, most of the white squares are being occupied. When you have a bind, look for a breakthrough on a square of the opposite color. Now, isn't that a fascinating strategy? So what's the winning move? Bishop to f1. Isn't that fascinating? That's fun to see, isn't it? And why? Why does black resign at this point? Because the black knight is attacked after he goes knight to c7. Bishop comes up to d3. And white is going to mate with bishop taking g6. That's why bringing that bishop down and then bringing it back up, what can the knight do? How can you prevent the bishop from taking that right there? You can't. At best, if you put your knight here, that doesn't do a thing for this one. Now you've got the full game. Isn't that fascinating? Because you can see the problem here, involved here. The pawn can't take the bishop. So you know black has to lose the exchange by taking it with the rook. But if he takes it with the rook anyway, that's not going to help him at all with this move here. Check. And now the king's in trouble. Well, that's checkmate. You can't move there either because the knight covers it. So that is a masterful positional game that Miles showed one of the strongest players, Ulf Andersson, in the 1980s. So there's your chessercise. Hope you enjoyed it. Keep studying the chessboard. Studying the master games really helps you see how they put the pieces together, coordinate, they use strategy, they involve great tactics, pins, skewers, removing the guard, etc. So, happy checkmating, happy exercising, happy chessercising, I should say. Yeah, it's exercise, it's mental exercise. And I will see you in the next video. Welcome to the Backyard Professor Chess videos. Hey, someone suggested I do something interesting that might be kind of a fun experiment, and I'm going to try it. Someone suggested I play my chess computer live while I'm videoing, and then share my thought processes. And in that way, maybe we can see where I think wrong, where I think right. We'll see how utilizing the imbalances can help. We'll see if I can practice reading the chessboard correctly. The downside of this is that I only have 30 minutes to make a video, so it's not like I can sit here and think through a move for 30 minutes, but at least I can play a game and we can see. So I'm going to open with the queen pawn opening. My computer goes to here. I'm going to go ahead and push the c4 pawn, and my computer goes to here. So immediately he's contesting the center. Now I've seen in the queen pawn openings, sometimes we want to push the e-pawn, sometimes we want to develop the knights. In this instance, I'm going to go ahead and pop my knight up here and see how my computer responds, and of course, he takes the pawn. Now, the question is, do I want to retake this pawn with the queen or with the knight? If I do the queen, his knight's going to come to here. Then I suppose I could move my queen over to here. Might be kind of a fun experiment to see, although I'm afraid he'll chase my queen around too much. But I'm going to try it just for the fun of it, because it's cool. It's cool to do experiments and see how the opponent responds. Now see, he came straight up. Of course, the question is, am I going to take this pawn with his knight here and his queen here? Maybe he can bring his queen up and exchange my queens. I don't know. Looking at this, I don't have a pawn outpost to put my knight on e5 now, though. Unfortunately, I can bring my queen over and bring my knight up later when he goes to castle. He's going to push this pawn. He'll probably develop it to here. He's not going to pull it up to here where I can take it with the queen, I don't think. On the other hand, you never know. So let's see what I can do here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my knight. I'm going to bring up my knight. And then he takes this pawn. So he's got my central pawns, and of course he's asking, do I want to try to make it so that he doesn't castle? Do I want to swap queens? He's got a knight. I will have superior development if I swap the queens, because I've got two knights out and I've got a bishop coming out. I'm going to go ahead and swap queens. I'm going to make it so he can't castle. Check, and he takes my queen. Here's why, because now I'm going to put my bishop up to here. Now the board is open, and now he moves his king back off of the file. Good thing. Now I can castle queenside, but I'm not really tucking my king to safety. You see how that works? I'm not ready to castle kingside yet. I don't need to castle technically yet, because there's nothing coming at me in the center. I've got a superior development here. Perhaps I ought to try to take that knight and break up his kingside pawns. That's what I'm thinking at this point. Or I can simply bring my other rook over here on the open file, push my pawn, pull my bishop out, take that pawn. Actually, open files, man, open files. Doggone it, I'm going to grab that open file. It is so important to have open files. That's too good to lose. And now he's putting the question to my bishop. And now I am going to, well, now I've seen Bronstein before, though, pull his bishop back here instead of exchanging that knight for the bishop, because the board is open and the bishops are going to be the most valuable pieces, not the knights. You see how that thinking works? So I'm going to pull my bishop back. I'm going to keep my bishop. See what he does. Oh, and he's chasing me all the way. He's chasing me all the way back and down. I've had this happen before. Now he's bringing his bishop out in a fianchetto to grab that long diagonal because I virtually have nothing over here. His king is stuck in the center. When the king gets stuck in the center, based on what I've read, you should try to attack that king with everything you've got. So I think it's important now to get my center development going. He pulls this pawn out here. Oh, and now he makes it so I can't take that pawn. On the other hand, he gave me that pawn. I'm going to take that pawn. Why not? And now he comes to here. And now look at the fork I've got. Fantastic. I love it when he plays like that. So now his king goes way off to there. And of course, I am going to take that rook. Definitely got the rook. That's nice. Well, he pushes his pawn. I've got the file. Oh, hey. I've got the file. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go check. And he drops his knight back. And I don't know if you can read that or not. He says, I want to resign. And I'm going to accept. Yeah, baby. Congratulations. Okay, fantastic. So, that's a quick game. That's a quick, fun game against my chess computer. It's rated, at this point in time, it's rated at 1309. So, that's one idea showing you the imbalances. See, quite frankly, it was the open file and the rook power that did it.